Have you ever hated someone so much that it felt like love? I spent years training to kill vampires, perfecting every technique, learning every weakness. But when I finally faced the vampire lord Darius, something went wrong. Instead of destroying him, I found myself drowning in his dark eyes, craving his forbidden touch. Now I don't know which is stronger, my need to kill him, or my need to kiss him. My name is Elena Blackthorne, and I am a vampire hunter. I speak this truth like a prayer, like a mantra, like the only thing standing between me and madness. Because today, for the first time in my 24 years of existence, I questioned whether the monsters I've spent my life destroying actually deserve to die. It started, as most catastrophes do, with the best of intentions. The village of Ravenshollow had been under siege for 3 months. Every night, another villager disappeared. Every morning, another body was found drained of blood, throat torn open by fangs that left no doubt about the nature of our enemy. The local clergy had sent word to the Order of the Silver Dawn, my order, the ancient organization that had dedicated itself to purging the vampire threat from the world. I had been chosen for this mission not because I was the strongest hunter or the most experienced, but because I was the most desperate. My family had been slaughtered by vampires 5 years ago. My parents, my younger brother, my infant sister, all butchered in a single night of blood and terror that had left me orphaned and burning with the need for vengeance. The Order had taken me in, trained me, honed my rage into a weapon sharp enough to pierce undead hearts. They had taught me that vampires were soulless demons wearing human faces, parasites that fed on mortal blood and felt nothing but hunger. They had taught me to hate, and I had been a very good student. But now, standing in the ruins of what had once been Ravenshollow's church, surrounded by the carnage left by creatures I was sworn to destroy, I found myself wondering if hatred was enough anymore. Elena. Father Marcus emerged from the shadows, his weathered face grim with exhaustion. Any sign of them? I shook my head, wiping vampire ash from my silver blade. 3 more destroyed tonight, but they were just fledglings. The real threat is still out there. The vampire lord? Darius. I spoke his name like a curse, though something deep in my chest tightened at the sound. He's the one orchestrating this. The others are just his pawns. Father Marcus nodded gravely. The council has received reports of his movements. He's been hunting you specifically, Elena. This entire siege, it might be a trap designed to draw you here. I felt a thrill of dark satisfaction at the thought. Good. Let him come. I've been hunting him for 2 years. It's time we finished this. Be careful, child. The reports suggest that this one is different from the others. Older, more powerful. Father Marcus placed a fatherly hand on my shoulder. More dangerous. They're all dangerous, I replied, sheathing my blade. That's what makes killing them so satisfying. But even as I spoke the words, I felt something stir in the back of my mind. A whisper of doubt. A flutter of something that might have been anticipation rather than bloodlust. For months, I had been tracking Darius across the countryside, always one step behind his devastating trail. I had studied his methods, learned his patterns, even begun to understand the twisted logic behind his choice of victims. He wasn't random like most vampires. He was selective, almost artistic in his kills. And lately, very lately, I had begun to dream about him. Not the nightmares I expected, visions of fangs and blood and screaming death. These were different dreams, darker and more disturbing in their intimacy. Dreams where I stood face to face with a man of impossible beauty, his dark eyes filled with longing rather than hunger. Dreams where he reached for me with gentle hands instead of claws. Dreams where I didn't pull away. Get some rest, Father Marcus advised. Tomorrow night, we make our final push. One way or another, this ends. I nodded and retreated to my quarters in what remained of the village inn, but sleep felt impossible. My mind churning with battle plans, and strategies, and the persistent whisper of doubt that had been growing stronger each day. What if the order was wrong about vampires? What if there was more to them than mindless hunger and evil? What if Darius was hunting me for reasons that had nothing to do with feeding? But Elena was about to discover that drinking vampire blood came with consequences she never imagined. The attack came at midnight, as I had known it would. I was ready for them, had been ready for hours, sitting in the darkened inn, with my weapons laid out like surgical instruments. Silver blade, wooden stakes, vials of holy water, crossbow bolts tipped with blessed silver. Everything I needed to turn the upcoming battle into a slaughter. What I wasn't ready for was the way my body responded when they finally arrived. The temperature in the room plummeted as shadows detached themselves from the walls. 3 vampires materialized from the darkness. 2 I didn't recognize, and 1 I had been hunting for the better part of a year. Mikhail, Darius's lieutenant, tall and lean with aristocratic features and cold amber eyes that held nothing but contempt for mortal life. I had been close to killing him twice before, but he had always managed to escape at the last moment. Elena Blackthorne, he said, his voice carrying the faint accent of some long-dead European court. The infamous vampire huntress. You're smaller than I expected, and you're about to be a pile of ash, I replied, rising from my chair with silver blade in hand. The other 2 vampires spread out to flank me, moving with inhuman speed and grace. But I had trained for this, had fought odds worse than 3 to 1 before. My body moved on pure instinct, the blade singing through the air as I engaged the nearest threat. The fight was brutal and brief. I destroyed the first vampire with a strike to the heart. His scream of agony cut short as he crumbled to dust. The second lasted longer, managing to rake claws across my ribs before I separated his head from his shoulders. But when I turned to face Mikhail, I found him watching me with something that looked disturbingly like approval. Impressive, he said, not even bothering to draw his own weapon. No wonder he's so fascinated by you. He? But I already knew the answer. Darius sends his regards. Mikhail smiled, revealing fangs that gleamed like ivory in the moonlight. And his invitation. He tossed something at my feet. A small crystal vial filled with dark liquid that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. What is it? I demanded, though my enhanced senses already told me the answer. The scent was unmistakable, rich and metallic, and somehow intoxicating. His blood, Mikhail said. The purest vampire essence in existence. 1 drop would make you immune to our kind's influence. A full vial, he shrugged elegantly. Well, that would make you more than human but less than vampire. The perfect hunter. I stared at the vial, my heart hammering against my ribs. Why would he give me the means to destroy him? Because, my dear huntress, he knows you'll drink it. Your hatred runs so deep that you'll risk anything for the chance to end his existence. Mikhail's smile widened. Even if it means binding yourself to him in ways you cannot imagine. What do you mean binding? But Mikhail was already backing toward the window, his form beginning to blur at the edges. Drink his blood, Elena Blackthorne. Become the hunter you were meant to be. And when you next meet our Lord, his laugh was like broken glass. Well, that will be very interesting indeed. He dissolved into mist and shadow, leaving me alone with the vial and a choice that would define the rest of my existence. I should have destroyed it. Should have smashed the crystal against the floor and let Darius's blood seep harmlessly into the wooden boards. Instead, I picked it up. The liquid was warm against the glass, pulsing with a rhythm that matched my own heartbeat. Just holding it sent strange sensations racing through my body. A tingling in my fingertips, a burning in my chest, a whisper in the back of my mind that sounded almost like music. Drink, the whisper seemed to say. Become what you were meant to be. The order had taught me about vampire blood, about its properties and effects. In small doses, it could indeed provide temporary immunity to vampiric influence. But a full vial of ancient vampire blood especially from one as powerful as Darius. The effects would be unpredictable, dangerous, potentially irreversible. I uncorked the vial and brought it to my lips before I could lose my nerve. The blood tasted like liquid fire and midnight storms. It burned down my throat and exploded through my veins like molten silver, rewriting every cell in my body with ancient power. The world tilted sideways as the transformation began. My human senses expanded exponentially. I could suddenly hear the heartbeats of villagers sleeping 3 houses away, could smell the fear and desperation that clung to every surface in the plague-ravaged town. But it was the new presence in my mind that truly terrified me. "Hello, Huntress!" The voice was velvet and shadow, intimate as a lover's whisper. It resonated through my thoughts with devastating familiarity, though I had never heard it spoken aloud. "Darius? Welcome to the bond, Elena. I've been waiting so long to speak with you directly." I tried to fight it, tried to push his presence from my mind, but it was like trying to hold back the tide with bare hands. He was there now, woven into my very essence by the blood I had willingly consumed. "You're in my head," I thought, panic rising in my chest. "And you are in mine." There was something that sounded like wonder in his mental voice. For the first time in centuries, I am not alone in my thoughts. "Do you understand what you've done, Elena?" I stumbled to my bed, my body shaking from the after effects of the transformation. "I made myself immune to your kind. You made yourself mine." The words carried weight and possession, and a hunger that had nothing to do with blood. Vampire blood creates bonds. Huntress. The stronger the vampire, the stronger the bond. And I am very old, very powerful, and very lonely. This is temporary. I told myself as much as him. The effects will fade. His laughter echoed through my mind like distant thunder. "Oh, my dear Elena, this is only the beginning." As I lost consciousness, claimed by exhaustion, and the cosmic changes reshaping my very essence, I felt him there in my thoughts, watching, waiting, drawing me deeper into a connection I had never wanted, but could no longer escape. The hunt was over, but something far more dangerous was about to begin. I woke in a place that couldn't exist. Gone was my simple room in the village inn. Instead, I found myself in a chamber of impossible luxury. Walls of polished obsidian, floors covered in rich Persian carpets. A massive bed draped in silk, the color of fresh blood. Candlelight flickered from wrought iron sconces, casting dancing shadows that seemed to move independently of their flames. The air smelled of sandalwood and old roses, with an underlying metallic tang that spoke of power and danger. And there, seated in an ornate chair by the window, was the most beautiful man I had ever seen. Darius was exactly as I had imagined, and nothing like I had expected. Tall and elegantly built, with the kind of classical features that belonged on Renaissance sculptures. His hair was dark as midnight, falling in waves past his shoulders, and his skin held the pale perfection that marked him as one of the undead. But it was his eyes that truly captured me. Deep brown, almost black, filled with intelligence, and amusement, and something that looked disturbingly like affection. "Good evening, Elena," he said, his voice carrying the same velvet tones that had whispered through my mind. "I trust you slept well?" I tried to sit up, to reach for weapons that weren't there, but my body felt strange and heavy. "This is a dream." "Is it?" He rose from his chair and moved toward me with predatory grace. "Or is this the first time we're meeting as equals?" "We are not equals," I snarled, finally managing to pull myself upright. "You're a monster, and I'm going to kill you." Such hostility. He settled on the edge of the bed, close enough that I could feel the unnatural chill that radiated from his skin. And after I went to such trouble to make our first real conversation comfortable. First real conversation? Oh, my dear Huntress. Did you think your dreams were random? His smile revealed fangs that gleamed like pearls. "I've been visiting your mind for months, watching you sleep, learning your thoughts and fears and desires. Ice formed in my veins. That's impossible. Vampires can't enter dreams unless they've tasted your blood, he finished. Which brings us to an interesting question. When exactly did I manage to bite you? I searched my memory frantically. Every encounter with a vampire was catalogued in my mind, every battle analyzed and dissected, but I had never been bitten, never been touched by vampire fangs. I haven't. No, you haven't. His dark eyes glittered with amusement. But you have been drinking my blood for quite some time. The world tilted around me. What? The holy water you've been using in your weapons? The blessed silver of your blades? Even the special draft the Order gives its hunters to protect them from vampiric influence? He leaned closer, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. All of it infused with my blood. Elena, tiny amounts, undetectable to human senses, but enough to create a connection. Horror and betrayal crashed over me like ice water. The Order, they knew. The Order has been feeding you my blood for 2 years, ever since you began hunting my kind with such enthusiasm. His fingers reached out to brush a strand of hair from my face, and I was too shocked to pull away. They thought it would make you a more effective killer. They had no idea it would make you mine. Aren't you? He traced the line of my jaw with one finger, his touch cool as winter morning. Tell me, Elena, what do you feel when you look at me? I wanted to say hatred, wanted to spit curses and threats and promises of his destruction, but staring into those dark eyes, feeling the strange electric current that passed between us at his touch, all I could manage was the truth. Confused, he smiled, not the cruel smirk I had expected, but something genuine and almost tender. That's the blood bond asserting itself. 2 years of consuming my essence has woven our souls together. Huntress, you feel what I feel. You want what I want. And what do you want? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility and threat in equal measure. Darius studied my face for a long moment, and I saw something vulnerable flicker in his ancient eyes. I want, he said quietly, to not be alone anymore. The simplicity of his answer hit me like a physical blow. This was the vampire lord who had terrorized half of Europe, who commanded legions of the undead, who could kill with a thought, and what he wanted was companionship. You're immortal, I said. You could have anyone. I could have anyone's body, he corrected. I could compel their desire, command their submission, make them worship me as a god. But what I cannot do, what no vampire can do, is create genuine connection. We are creatures of hunger. Elena, we take what we need and feel nothing for those we consume. But you, he cupped my face in both hands, his touch sending shivers through my entire body. You have been drinking my blood for 2 years. You carry part of my essence within you, just as I now carry part of yours. When I look at you, I don't see prey, I see possibility. I should have pushed him away, should have fought against the strange magnetism that seemed to pull me toward him like gravity. But his touch felt so familiar, so right, as if my body had been waiting my entire life for this moment. This is the blood talking, I said, though I made no move to escape his hands. Some kind of vampiric compulsion, is it? His thumbs traced the line of my cheekbones, and I felt my resolve crumbling like sand. Or is this what you've been feeling in your dreams, when your conscious mind wasn't there to build walls between us? Before I could answer, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if he was afraid I might disappear at any moment. But when I didn't pull away, when I found myself melting into his embrace instead, it deepened into something hungrier, more desperate. I tasted eternity on his lips, felt centuries of loneliness and desire flowing from his mind into mine. But underneath it all was something purely human, a need for connection that transcended his vampiric nature. When we finally broke apart, I was gasping for air. I didn't realize I needed. This is wrong. I breathed. "This is inevitable," he replied. "You've been mine since the first drop of my blood touched your tongue, Elena. The only question is whether you'll fight it or embrace it." I stared into his dark eyes and felt something inside me fracture. The hatred that had sustained me for 5 years. The rage that had driven me to become the Order's most feared hunter. All of it was crumbling in the face of this impossible connection. "I don't know how," I admitted. "Then let me teach you," he whispered, and kissed me again. This time, I kissed him back. The blood bond was growing stronger each day, and soon Elena would have to choose between her duty and her heart. I woke in my own bed with the taste of eternity still on my lips. Sunlight streamed through the inn's small window, revealing the familiar surroundings of my temporary quarters. My weapons lay exactly where I had left them. My hunting leathers hung on their peg by the door. Everything was normal, mundane, human, except for the bite marks on my throat. I rushed to the cracked mirror hanging above the wash basin, my fingers probing the tender skin of my neck. There, just below my left ear, were 2 small puncture wounds surrounded by a faint bruise in the shape of lips. "No," I whispered, touching the marks with trembling fingers. "It was just a dream." But the wounds were real enough, and they throbbed with each beat of my heart like a second pulse. When I pressed against them, I felt an echo of the pleasure that had accompanied their creation, a memory of Darius's fangs piercing my skin as I arched beneath him, lost in sensations I had never imagined possible. "Good morning, Huntress." His voice in my mind was stronger now, clearer. The bite had deepened our connection, allowing him to speak to me, even across whatever distance separated us. That wasn't a dream, I thought back, not bothering to fight the mental link. What was the point? He was already in my head. "No," he agreed. "That was our souls recognizing each other. Your consciousness joined mine in the realm between sleeping and waking, where the barriers between self and other grow thin." I sank onto my bed, overwhelmed by the implications. "You bit me. You asked me to." There was gentle amusement in his mental voice, quite insistently. As I recall, heat flooded my cheeks as fragments of memory surfaced. My hands tangled in his dark hair, my body pressed against his as I whispered desperate pleas for more. I had wanted his bite, had craved the completion of our bond with an intensity that terrified me. "This is wrong," I thought. "I'm supposed to kill you, not love me." The word hung in my mind like a challenge. Love. Did I love him? How could I love someone I had never truly met? Someone who was everything I had been trained to despise. But as I sat there in the morning sunlight, feeling his presence warm and constant in my thoughts, I couldn't deny the truth any longer. I was falling in love with a vampire, Elena. His mental voice turned serious. "There's something you need to know about tonight, about what the Order is planning." "What do you mean?" "Father Marcus isn't who you think he is. The mission to Raven's Hollow, your presence here, it's all been orchestrated." I shot to my feet, rage flooding through me. "You're lying." "I wish I were." His sadness echoed through our bond. "The Order has been manipulating you from the beginning, Elena. Everything you think you know about your family's death, about vampire nature, about your own purpose, it's been carefully constructed to turn you into their perfect weapon." My family was murdered by vampires. I fought fiercely. I saw their bodies, saw what your kind did to them. You saw what you were meant to see. His voice carried infinite gentleness. "But the truth, my beloved Huntress, is far more complex than you know." Before I could demand an explanation, a knock sounded at my door. "Elena?" Father Marcus's voice called. "Are you awake? We need to discuss tonight's strategy." I looked at my reflection in the mirror, at the bite marks that proved my night with Darius had been real, at the way my eyes now held flecks of gold that hadn't been there before. "How do I know you're not the one lying?" The knock came again, more insistent. "Coming," I called, quickly pulling my hair forward to hide the bite marks. But as I moved toward the door, Darius's final words whispered through my mind. Tonight, when we meet in truth, you'll have to choose your duty to the order or your bond with me. Choose carefully, my love. Both our eternities depend on it. Good morning, child, Father Marcus said, though his eyes were sharp as he studied my face. You look different. I'm fine, I lied. Just eager to finish this mission. Excellent. Because tonight, we end the vampire threat in Raven's Hollow once and for all. His smile was cold and satisfied. Tonight, you fulfill your true purpose. As he outlined the battle plan, I listened with growing horror. The Order wasn't just planning to destroy Darius. They were planning to use me as bait in a trap that would result in the slaughter of every vampire in the region, regardless of their guilt or innocence. And for the first time in my life, the thought of vampire deaths made me sick. But the real truth about Elena's vampire immunity was darker than she could have ever suspected. You want me to do what? I stared at Father Marcus in disbelief. Present yourself as a willing sacrifice, he repeated calmly. Darius believes you are bound to him now. He'll come for you, thinking to claim his prize. And when he does, the other hunters emerged from the shadows. 6 of them, all seasoned killers armed with weapons designed specifically for vampire destruction. I recognized most of them from the Order's headquarters. Elite warriors who had dedicated their lives to the eradication of the undead. When he does, we destroy him and every vampire he's brought with him. Finished, Brother Augustine. The Order's chief interrogator, his cold blue eyes fixed on me with uncomfortable intensity. You've done well, Elena. Your infiltration of his defenses has been masterful. Infiltration? The word felt foreign on my tongue. Did you think we didn't know about the blood bond? Father Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We've been monitoring your dreams for weeks, child. Ever since you began consuming his essence, we've been able to observe your interactions. Sacred magic allows us many things, Brother Augustine said, including the ability to observe psychic connections between our hunters and their targets. Your bond with Darius has provided us with invaluable intelligence about vampire hierarchy and weaknesses. You used me. The words came out flat, emotionless, though inside I was screaming. We trained you, Father Marcus corrected. We gave you purpose, Elena, direction for your grief and rage. Without the Order, you would have been just another victim of vampire cruelty. My family, your family was indeed killed by vampires, Brother Augustine said, but not randomly, not by chance. His eyes glittered with cruel satisfaction. We arranged for their deaths to ensure your hatred would burn hot enough to sustain your training. The world tilted sideways. You murdered my family. We provided them as bait to attract a vampire nest. Father Marcus said calmly. Their sacrifice served the greater good. Elena, just as your sacrifice will tonight. Did you think we planned for you to survive this mission? Brother Augustine laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You're contaminated now, child. Corrupted by vampire blood and unholy desires. After tonight's battle, after Darius is destroyed, you'll need to be cleansed. You're going to kill me. We're going to purify you, Father Marcus said gently, as if explaining something to a slow child. Fire cleanses all corruption. Elena, your soul will thank us in the afterlife. Rage built in my chest, but not the familiar human anger I had always known. This was something deeper, more primal, a fury that tasted of blood and starlight, an ancient power. The vampire blood in my veins responded to my emotion, flooding my system with inhuman strength and speed. When I moved, it was faster than mortal eyes could follow. My silver blade appeared in my hand as if summoned, its point coming to rest against Father Marcus's throat before he could even blink. Elena, he said carefully, you need to calm down. Calm down? My voice carried harmonics it had never held before. You murdered my family. You've been manipulating me for years, You're planning to burn me alive after I complete your suicide mission. And you want me to calm down? Elena. Darius's voice whispered through my mind, urgent and concerned. What's happening? I can feel your rage through the bond. The order. I thought back. They killed my family. They've been using me as a weapon. His fury exploded through our connection, so intense that I staggered under its weight. I'm coming for you. No. Wait, but the connection went dead, severed by his sudden movement. Wherever he was, Darius was racing toward Raven's Hollow, with the full power of his vampiric nature unleashed. Excellent, Brother Augustine said, having observed my moment of distraction. He's taken the bait. Hunters, to your positions. The trap is about to spring. The assembled warriors melted back into the shadows, moving to surround the inn. In moments, the building would become a killing ground, designed to end the existence of the most powerful vampire in Europe. And I was supposed to be the lure that drew him in. Elena, Father Marcus said, his voice carrying false paternal concern. You need to decide where your loyalties lie. Will you serve the order that gave your life meaning? Or will you betray everything you've been taught for the sake of unholy lust? I really looked at him, for the first time, at the cold calculation in his eyes, the complete absence of genuine care or compassion. This man had watched me grieve my family for years, had comforted me through nightmares and rage, all while knowing that he was responsible for their deaths. I've already decided, I said, and drove my blade through his heart. Father Marcus's eyes widened in shock, then went glassy as death claimed him. His body crumpled to the floor, mortal blood pooling beneath him in stark contrast to the ancient vampire essence that sang through my veins. Elena. Darius's voice returned to my mind. Closer now. I can smell blood. What's happened? I chose. I thought back. I chose you, my fierce huntress. His love flowed through our bond, like warm honey. Hold on. I'm almost there. Through the inn's windows, I could see the other hunters taking their positions, crossbows loaded with blessed silver, holy water grenades, stakes carved from wood, taken from the true cross itself. They were ready for Darius, but they weren't ready for me. Not anymore. Elena thought she was the hunter, but she was about to learn she'd been the prey all along. The battle, when it came, was nothing like what the Order had planned. Darius arrived like a force of nature, not the skulking, cowardly creature of church propaganda, but a being of such terrible beauty and power that reality itself seemed to bend around him. He materialized in the inn's common room in a swirl of shadow and starlight, his dark eyes immediately finding mine across the chaos. Elena, he said, and my name on his lips sounded like a prayer. The hunters attacked immediately, their blessed weapons gleaming as they sought undead flesh. But they had prepared for the wrong enemy. I moved between them and Darius, like a force of nature, my vampire-enhanced speed and strength turning me into something beyond human. The silver blade that had taken so many undead lives now sang as it cut down the living, my body moving with inhuman grace as I carved through the Order's elite warriors. Brother Augustine fell first. His head separated from his shoulders before he could even scream. The others lasted longer, their training and blessed weapons giving them advantages against a normal vampire. But I wasn't a normal vampire. I was something new, human compassion and love enhanced by immortal power and speed. I was what Darius had always dreamed of creating. I was perfect. Magnificent, Darius breathed, as the last hunter crumpled to the floor. You are absolutely magnificent, my love. I stood among the carnage I had created, silver blade dripping with the blood of men who had shaped my entire existence. I should have felt horror at what I had done, remorse for the lives I had taken. Instead, I felt free. They used me, I said, wiping my blade clean. For years they fed me your blood and called it holy protection. They murdered my family and called it God's will. They planned to burn me alive and called it purification. And now, I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, without the filter of hatred and conditioning. He was beautiful, yes, but more than that. He was alone, ancient, carrying the weight of centuries with no one to share his burden. Now I understand why you've been hunting me, I said. You weren't looking for a victim. You were looking for an equal. He nodded, his dark eyes soft with emotion. I was only beginning to understand. For 800 years, I have existed without true companionship. I have had servants, thralls, even willing lovers, but never an equal. Never someone who could stand beside me as a partner, rather than a subject. And you think I could be that someone? I know you could be. He stepped closer, careful not to crowd me despite the carnage around us. The blood bond has shown me your heart, Elena, your capacity for love, for loyalty, for fierce protection of those you care about. These are not human traits or vampire traits, they are simply you. But standing here in the aftermath of battle, looking at this immortal being who offered me love instead of death, I felt human in a way I hadn't for years. What happens now? I asked. Now we leave this place, he said. Together, we find somewhere safe where you can complete your transformation without interference. Transformation? His expression grew serious. The blood bond is only the beginning. Elena, to become my true equal, to rule beside me as you were meant to, you'll need to cross over completely. You'll need to become vampire. The word hung in the air between us, like a sword. Vampire, the thing I had been trained to destroy, the enemy I had dedicated my life to eradicating. I can see your fear, Darius said gently, and I understand it. The transformation is significant. Will I become like them? I gestured toward the window, where I could sense other vampires moving through the night. Cold? Hungry? Soulless? You'll become like me, he corrected. And I am none of those things, despite what the order taught you. He held out his hand, palm up, an invitation rather than a command. Come, let me show you what vampire truly means. I placed my hand in his and felt our bond flare to life with renewed intensity. Together? I asked. Always, he promised, and led me out into the night. But the real truth about Elena's vampire immunity was darker than she could have ever suspected. Darius's castle was not what I had expected. This is where you live? I asked, still holding his hand as he led me through corridors lined with artwork that spanned millennia. This is where we live, he corrected. If you choose to stay. We entered a circular chamber at the heart of the castle, its walls covered in murals that seemed to move and shift in the candlelight. At the center stood a pool of still water that reflected, not our images, but scenes from history itself. I want to show you something, Darius said, guiding me toward the pool. The truth about vampires, about the order, about your own family. I don't understand. Look, he said simply, and touched the water's surface. The pool shimmered, and suddenly I was seeing the past as if it were happening before my eyes, but not the history I had been taught, not the sanitized version of events the order had fed me. I saw the first vampires, not demons or monsters, but humans who had been transformed by ancient magic to serve as guardians of the dead. They guided souls to their rest, protected the boundaries between life and death, maintained cosmic balance. We were never meant to be predators, Darius's voice whispered in my ear. We were meant to be shepherds. The images shifted, showing the rise of the Order of the Silver Dawn. But these weren't holy warriors defending humanity. They were power-hungry zealots who saw vampires as competitors for divine authority. They rewrote history, I breathed, watching scenes of vampire families slaughtered not for their crimes, but for their refusal to bow to church authority. The pool showed more recent events. My own family, alive and happy in our small farmhouse. I saw my father teaching my brother to read, my mother singing lullabies to my baby sister, myself as a young girl playing in fields of wildflowers. and I saw the night they died. But the figures attacking our home weren't vampires. They wore the robes of the Order, carried weapons blessed by church authority. They murdered my family with cold efficiency, then used dark magic to make their wounds appear as vampire bites. No, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. No, that's not. They wouldn't. They needed a hunter driven by pure hatred. Darius said, his arms coming around me from behind as I stared at the horrible truth. They needed someone so consumed by rage that they would never question orders, never show mercy, never see vampires as anything but monsters to be destroyed. They killed my family to create a weapon. They killed your family to create you. His lips brushed my ear, his voice infinitely gentle. My fierce, passionate, perfectly deadly Elena. I turned in his arms, looking up into those dark eyes that held centuries of pain and loneliness. How long have you known? I began to suspect when I first encountered you in battle. You fought with a fury that went beyond training, beyond even righteous anger. You fought like someone seeking death, as much as dealing it. His hands framed my face tenderly. When I researched your background, when I learned the details of your family's murder, the inconsistencies were obvious to anyone who wasn't blinded by grief. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because you had to discover it for yourself. If I had simply informed you, you would have dismissed it as vampiric manipulation. But now, having felt the truth of our bond, having experienced the Order's betrayal firsthand, he smiled sadly. Now you can see clearly. What am I now? I asked. I'm not human anymore, but I'm not vampire either. You are something new, he said. Something unprecedented. A bridge between worlds, just as the original vampires were meant to be. And if I complete the transformation, if I become fully vampire, then we rule together. We restore vampires to their original purpose, guardians of death rather than dealers of it. We create a new order based on truth rather than lies. He leaned down and pressed his forehead against mine, his breath cool against my skin. But the choice is yours, Elena. I will not compel you, will not use our bond to influence your decision. If you wish to remain as you are, caught between mortal and immortal, I will love you regardless. I stared into his eyes and saw eternity stretching before us. Not the cold, empty forever that the Order had taught me to fear, but something warm and purposeful and filled with possibility. How? I whispered. The same way you created our bond, he said, with blood freely given and willingly received. But this time, his fangs extended slightly, gleaming in the candlelight. This time, you must choose to die and be reborn. Will it hurt? For a moment, his thumb traced my lower lip. But then you'll understand what you were truly meant to be. I thought of my murdered family, of the lies that had shaped my existence, of the lonely years spent hunting shadows while the real monsters hid behind holy symbols. Then I thought of the blood bond, of the love that flowed between us like a river of liquid starlight, of the possibility of spending eternity beside someone who truly understood me. Yet with each passing night, the line between love and obsession grew thinner. The bite, when it came, was nothing like what I had expected. Instead of pain, I felt an overwhelming rush of connection, not just to Darius, but to every vampire who had ever existed. Their memories flooded through me, centuries of loneliness and beauty, power and sorrow, the endless struggle between their true nature and the monster mythology that humans had imposed upon them. I felt my heartbeat slowing, my human warmth fading, as something far more ancient took its place. But unlike the cold emptiness I had feared, this felt like coming home to myself. Let go, Darius whispered against my throat, his fangs still buried in my neck. Let go of everything you thought you knew, and embrace what you are becoming. My mortal life flashed before my eyes as it drained away, not just my own memories, but the false memories the Order had implanted, the lies they had used to shape me into their perfect weapon. I felt them burning away like fog in sunlight, leaving only truth behind. And the truth was beautiful. I saw my family as they truly were, not victims of random vampire violence, but casualties in a war between light and darkness that they had never even known existed. Their deaths had been orchestrated, yes, but not by the creatures I had been taught to hate. They had been killed by the same zealots who had raised me to be a killer. I remember now, I gasped as the transformation reached its peak. I remember everything. Tell me, Darius said, his voice tight with concern. The night they died, there was someone else there, someone in order robes who stood back and watched, while the others... I couldn't finish the sentence. The pain was too raw, too immediate. Who? Brother Augustine. He was there. Darius. He watched my family die and then comforted me at their funeral. He's been manipulating me from the very beginning. Darius's fury blazed through our bond with such intensity that the very air around us began to heat. He will pay for that betrayal. We both will make him pay, I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. But not tonight. Tonight is ours. The transformation was nearing completion now. I could feel my enhanced senses awakening, could perceive things that human eyes could never detect. The flow of blood through Darius's veins, the rustle of night creatures in the castle gardens, the whisper of wind through corridors that stretched beyond mortal comprehension. But most importantly, I could feel the bonds that connected every vampire to every other, a vast network of shared existence that had been fractured by centuries of persecution, but never truly broken. I can feel them all, I whispered in wonder. Every vampire in the world. They're all connected, as they should be, Darius said. As we were meant to be, before fear and hatred drove us into isolation. He lifted his head from my throat, his fangs retracting as the bite marks began to heal with supernatural speed. But the connection between us had deepened beyond anything I could have imagined. I could feel his thoughts as clearly as my own, could sense his emotions like phantom limbs. How do you feel? He asked, studying my face with concern. I took inventory of my transformed body. Stronger, faster, more attuned to the supernatural currents that flowed through the world. But underneath the physical changes, something more fundamental had shifted. Free, I said, and realized it was true. For the first time in my life, I feel completely free. And the hunger, I considered this. The vampire hunger was there. Yes, a low burning in my throat that spoke of need and sustenance. But it wasn't the savage, uncontrollable craving that church doctrine had described. It's manageable, I said, like thirst, but deeper. Because you were already carrying vampire essence, he explained. The transformation was a completion rather than a fundamental change. You won't suffer the madness that often accompanies new vampires. What about sunlight? Running water? All the weaknesses the order taught me about. And stakes through the heart? Will kill us. Yes. But then they'll kill anyone. His hands cupped my face tenderly. We are not the monsters they painted us as. Elena, we are simply another form of life. No more evil than wolves or lions. I leaned into his touch, marveling at how right it felt. The blood bond had prepared me for this moment, had gradually accustomed me to his presence until transformation felt like destiny rather than damnation. So what now? I asked. We're bonded. I'm vampire. The order thinks we're both dead. What do we do with eternity? We rebuild, he said simply. We find the vampires who remember their true purpose and help them reclaim it. We protect mortals from the real threats, the rogue vampires who have embraced monstrosity, the dark creatures that prey on both human and undead. And we stay together, for as long as eternity allows, he promised. If you'll have me, I answered by pulling him down for a kiss that tasted of blood and starlight, and forever, in his arms, surrounded by his love and power. I finally understood what I had been searching for all these years. Not vengeance, not duty, not even justice, home. But Elena and Darius were about to discover that their greatest enemies weren't hunters or rogues. Our first challenge as partners came sooner than expected. We had been planning to leave Raven's Hollow immediately, to find other vampires who might be willing to embrace their original purpose as guardians rather than predators. But as we prepared to depart the castle, an unexpected visitor arrived. "Darius," she said, her voice carrying the weight of millennia. How disappointing. I felt him tense beside me, his protective instincts flaring through our bond. "Lilith, I wasn't expecting you." Clearly, her gaze shifted to me, and I felt her power pressing against my newly transformed mind, like ice water. "And this must be the little hunter who has so thoroughly corrupted your judgment." "Elena is my mate," Darius said, his voice carrying warning. "Show her the respect due to my equal." Lilith laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your equal? A newborn vampire who still reeks of mortality. Really, Darius? Your loneliness has made you desperate." "What do you want, Lilith?" "I want you to remember your place in the hierarchy," she replied, moving closer with predatory grace. "You are the lord of the Eastern Territories, commander of 12 covens, ruler of thousands of vampire souls. You do not throw away that responsibility for the sake of a blood bond with a former enemy." "The responsibility I never asked for," Darius countered. "The title you and the other ancients forced upon me when you grew tired of ruling directly. And now you wish to abandon it? To play house with this mortal-turned-vampire, while your territories fall into chaos?" Lilith's eyes blazed with cold fury. "The rogue covens are already moving. Darius, without your direct control, they're returning to their predatory ways. Innocent mortals are dying because you've chosen love over duty." I felt guilt stab through me like a blade. "He's been neglecting his responsibilities because of me." "Don't listen to her," Darius said quickly. "Lilith has her own agenda. My agenda is survival," she snapped. "For 8 centuries we have maintained a careful balance. Enough predation to sustain our kind, but not enough to provoke another Inquisition. Your little romance threatens to upset that balance entirely." She waved her hand and images appeared in the air around us. Scenes of vampire attacks across Europe, but these weren't the surgical strikes that Darius preferred. These were massacres. Entire villages drained of blood, bodies left displayed as warnings and challenges. "The Covenant of Blood has risen again," Lilith continued. "The old faction that believes vampires should rule mortals as cattle rather than coexist with them. They see your softness as weakness, Darius. They're moving to claim your territories. Then we'll stop them," I said, stepping forward, despite my newborn status. Together, Lilith's laughter was genuinely amused. "This time, it's a vampire less than an hour old. Child, you don't even know how to feed properly yet." "She doesn't need to feed the way others do," Darius said, pride evident in his voice. "The blood bond sustains her. She is stronger than newborns, more controlled than fledglings." "What are you proposing?" "Alliance," she said simply. "Your strength, my political connections, Elena's unique abilities. Together we might be able to crush the Covenant before they plunge our kind back into open war with humanity." I studied her perfect, ancient face, looking for signs of deception. "What do you get out of this alliance?" "Survival," she said bluntly. "If the Covenant succeeds, if they return vampires to the role of apex predators, it will trigger another Inquisition. This time, the Church won't be content with hunting individual vampires. They'll seek total extermination. And you believe we can prevent that?" "I believe that Elena's transformation represents something new," Lilith said, her cold gaze fixing on me with uncomfortable intensity. "A vampire created not through death and hunger, but through love and choice. If that's true, if her humanity survived the change intact, then she could be the bridge between our kinds," Darius finished. "The proof that vampires and humans can coexist," or Lilith said darkly. She could be the weapon that destroys us. The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. I was indeed something unprecedented. A vampire hunter transformed by love rather than death, carrying both human compassion and immortal power. But unprecedented meant untested, unproven, dangerous. The Covenant will come for us, Darius said finally. Whether we fight them or not, they'll see Elena as a threat to their vision of vampire supremacy. Then we might as well choose our battlefield, I said, surprising myself with my decisiveness. If there's going to be a war, let's make sure we're fighting for something worth preserving. Lilith smiled, and for the first time, I saw approval in her ancient eyes. Very well, but understand the stakes. Young Queen, if we fail, if the Covenant triumphs, both our kinds will pay the price. Vampires will become the monsters they've been painted as, and humans will respond with extermination. And if we succeed? If we succeed, Darius said, his arms tightening around me, we create a new world, one where vampires remember their true purpose, where humans understand that not all monsters are evil, where love can exist even between natural enemies. I thought of all the innocent mortals who would die if the Covenant had their way. I thought of the vampires who would be hunted to extinction if another Inquisition began. I thought of the choice between duty and love that had defined my entire existence. Then we don't have a choice, I said. We fight. But their greatest enemy wouldn't be the Covenant of Blood. It would be the secret Elena carried in her transformed blood. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 days later. We had been traveling toward the Covenant's stronghold in the Carpathian Mountains, gathering allies along the way. Word of my transformation had spread through the vampire underground, drawing both curiosity and concern from creatures who had never encountered anything like me. Most were fascinated by the idea of a hunter-turned-vampire. Some were suspicious of my motives. A few were openly hostile to the concept of a former enemy joining their ranks. But all of them felt it, when my true nature began to manifest. It started as a warmth in my chest, a gentle glow that seemed to emanate from my heart. At first I thought it was simply the blood bond strengthening, as Darius and I grew closer. But when the glow began to affect other vampires, I realized something far more significant was happening. Elena, whispered Marcus, a young vampire who had joined our cause. What are you doing to me? I looked at him in confusion. I'm not doing anything, but I was. The warm light that pulsed from my heart was washing over him in visible waves, and wherever it touched, he seemed to change. His usual vampiric pallor took on hints of healthy color. His cold, predatory demeanor softened into something more human. I feel. He touched his chest in wonder. I feel warm. How is that possible? Darius appeared beside me, his dark eyes wide with amazement and concern. Elena, look at your hands. I raised my hands and gasped. They were glowing with soft golden light, the same warmth that was affecting Marcus spreading outward from my skin, like visible compassion. What's happening to me? Before Darius could answer, Lilith materialized in our camp with her usual dramatic flair. But for once, her perfect composure was cracked, her ancient face showing something that looked like fear. We need to talk, she said urgently. Now. She led us away from the other vampires into a grove of ancient trees where no mortal ears could overhear. Once we were alone, she began to pace with agitated energy. Elena, she said finally, I need you to tell me exactly how your transformation occurred. Every detail. I drank Darius's blood voluntarily, I said, confusion evident in my voice. I chose the transformation willingly, out of love rather than hunger or desperation. And your death? The moment when your mortal life ended? I frowned, searching my memories. There wasn't one. The change was gradual, a completion of the bond that had been building for months. Lilith stopped pacing, her face going white as fresh snow. You never died. What does that mean? Darius asked, though I could feel his growing concern through our bond. It means, Lilith said slowly, that Elena isn't really vampire at all. She's something else entirely. The grove fell silent except for the whisper of wind through leaves. I felt power stirring in my chest again, the golden light responding to my emotional turmoil. "Explain," I demanded. "Into what?" Lilith met my eyes, and I saw something that might have been reverence in her ancient gaze. Into what vampires were before they became vampires. Into what we lost when humanity forced us to become monsters. "I don't understand. The original guardians of death weren't undead," she explained. "They were mortals who had been blessed or cursed with the ability to perceive and interact with the supernatural world. They guided souls to their rest, protected the boundaries between realms, served as bridges between life and death. But they were mortal? They were mortal with immortal purpose. Humans who had been touched by divine power, given extended lifespans and enhanced abilities to fulfill their cosmic role." Lilith's voice carried the weight of ancient memory. "When the church began hunting them, when survival required transformation into something more resilient, they became vampires," Darius finished. "They chose undeath over extinction. But in doing so, they lost their original nature. They became predators instead of guardians, creatures of hunger instead of servants of balance." Lilith turned to me. "Until now. Until you." I felt the golden light pulsing stronger in my chest, responding to my growing understanding. "You're saying I'm what vampires were originally meant to be." "I'm saying you're what we could become again," she replied. "If your transformation is truly complete, if you've retained your humanity while gaining immortal power, you could restore our kind to their original purpose." "And the warmth I'm radiating? The way it's affecting other vampires?" "Purification," Darius said, wonder evident in his voice. "You're not just immune to vampiric corruption, you're curing it, restoring the divine spark that was buried beneath centuries of monstrous conditioning." Around us, the very air seemed to shimmer with possibility. If this was true, if I really could help vampires remember their original purpose, the Covenant will see this as an existential threat. Lilith warned. "A vampire who can cure other vampires, who can strip away their predatory nature and replace it with guardian instincts. They'll stop at nothing to destroy you." "Let them try," I said, feeling power coil in my muscles like a living thing. "I've spent years learning how to kill vampires. If some of them choose to remain monsters, I'll give them exactly what they deserve. And if they choose transformation instead." I thought of Marcus, of the way his cold predatory demeanor had softened under my influence, of the possibility of helping an entire species remember what they had been before. Fear and hatred had twisted them into something else. "Then we give them back their souls," I said. But the Covenant of Blood had been preparing for Elena's arrival longer than anyone realized. The attack came at dawn, when vampires should have been at their weakest. Darius and I were resting in an abandoned monastery, our small group of allies spread throughout the ancient building. The irony of seeking sanctuary in a place once dedicated to our destruction wasn't lost on any of us. But the thick stone walls and consecrated ground provided protection from both mortal and immortal threats. I felt them before I saw them, a wrongness in the air that made my newly enhanced senses scream warnings. These weren't ordinary vampires approaching. They carried something darker, something that reeked of corruption and ancient malice. "Darius," I whispered, shaking him from his rest. "We have company." He was awake instantly, his immortal reflexes engaging as he sensed the same threats I did. Around us, our allies began to stir as well. Marcus, the young vampire I had accidentally begun to purify. Isabella, former courtesan turned vampire, who had retained her humanity through sheer force of will. Gabriel, an ancient warrior, who remembered when vampires had been protectors rather than predators. "How many?" Darius asked, his voice grim. "Dozens," I replied, my enhanced hearing picking up the sound of movement all around the monastery. "Maybe more. The Covenant moves quickly," Lilith said, appearing beside us with her usual dramatic timing. I received word an hour ago that they were gathering forces. I came to warn you. A little late for warnings, Gabriel observed, checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. Despite being vampire, he still carried the silver blade and wooden stakes that had served him in his mortal life as a knight. They're not just here to kill us, I said, a terrible realization dawning. They're here to corrupt us. Through the stone walls, I could sense the approaching vampires more clearly now. They carried something with them, a darkness that felt like the inverse of my purifying light. Where I radiated warmth and restoration, they brought cold corruption that sought to strip away anything pure or noble. Blood magic, Darius snarled, recognizing the threat. They're using rituals from the old days, from before vampires learned restraint. The kind that turn angels into demons, Lilith replied. The kind that could reverse your transformation, Elena, and turn you into the very monster the Order always claimed you were. Ice formed in my veins. As understanding hit, the Covenant wasn't just trying to kill me. They were trying to corrupt me, to prove that my purifying nature was temporary, and that all vampires were destined to become predators eventually. If they succeed, Isabella said quietly, if they manage to strip away your humanity and turn you into a true monster, and it would destroy any hope of reconciliation between our kinds. Darius added, his hand finding mine. Humans would see that even a purified vampire could be corrupted, and they would never trust us again. The sounds of movement were growing closer now. Through the monastery's ancient windows, I could see shapes moving in the pre-dawn darkness. Vampires older and more powerful than any I had ever faced. Their forms wreathed in the dark energy of their corrupting magic. How do we fight magic like that? I asked. We don't, Lilith said grimly. We run. We find somewhere they can't follow and regroup. No, the word came out with more force than I had intended, carrying harmonics of power that made the monastery walls vibrate. I'm tired of running, tired of letting others dictate the terms of engagement. I stood, feeling my purifying light respond to my determination. The golden glow that emanated from my heart grew brighter, stronger, pushing back against the corruption that sought to invade our sanctuary. Elena, Darius warned, you're still new to this power. We don't know its limits. Then it's time to find out, I replied, moving toward the monastery's main doors. If the Covenant wants to see what I'm truly capable of, let's give them a demonstration. This is madness. Lilith protested. They outnumber us 10-1. They outnumber our bodies, I corrected. But we have something they don't, which is, I thought of my family, murdered by zealots, who valued ideology over innocent life. I thought of the years I had spent believing lies, hunting creatures who were trying to reclaim their nobility. I thought of Darius alone for 8 centuries, until our bond showed him that love was possible even for immortals. We have something worth fighting for, I said. They're fighting to remain monsters. We're fighting to remember what it means to be guardians. At their head was a creature I barely recognized as having once been vampire, taller than any mortal, with skin like charred bone, and eyes that burned with unholy fire. He radiated malice so pure it was almost a physical force. Valdris, Darius snarled, recognition and ancient hatred coloring his voice. Nephew? I thought through our bond. My maker's brother. Darius replied grimly. The one who tried to convince our kind that mortals existed only to feed us. Valdris's burning gaze fixed on me, and I felt his corrupting influence pressing against my mind like acid. And this must be the little hunter who thinks she can redeem our kind. How quaint. I don't think I can redeem anyone, I said, stepping forward to meet his gaze directly. I know that those who want redemption will find it, and those who choose to remain monsters will face the consequences. Brave words from a newborn. Valdris raised one clawed hand, and the corruption magic around him intensified. Let me show you what you truly are, child. Let me strip away the illusions and reveal the beast that lurks in every vampire's heart. Dark energy lashed out from his form, seeking to penetrate my defenses and poison the purifying light within me. I felt it pressing against my consciousness, trying to awaken hunger and cruelty and contempt for mortal life. But instead of overwhelming me, the corruption met my light and simply dissolved. Impossible, Valdris hissed. I smiled, feeling my power surge in response to his attack. You're trying to corrupt something that was never pure to begin with. I was raised to hate, trained to kill, shaped by years of rage and violence. But I chose love anyway. I chose connection over isolation, partnership over domination. You can't corrupt someone who has already chosen their nature. I continued, advancing on Valdris despite his overwhelming physical presence. And I choose to be a guardian, not a predator. Then you choose to die, he snarled, and launched himself at me with inhuman speed. The battle that followed shook the very foundations of the monastery. But Elena was about to learn that some corruptions run deeper than magic can reach. Valdris was stronger than anything I had ever faced, not just physically, but spiritually. 8 centuries of embracing his vampiric nature had made him into something beyond normal undead, a creature of pure predatory instinct wrapped in the shell of aristocratic beauty. His claws raked across my ribs, sending me flying into the monastery wall, with enough force to crack stone. But the pain only fueled my determination, my purifying light blazing brighter as I pushed myself back to my feet. You fight well for a newborn, he acknowledged, circling me like a wolf, evaluating prey. But you lack the killer instinct necessary for true victory. Do I? I wiped blood from my mouth and smiled. I've killed 17 vampires with my own hands, Valdris. What makes you think I've lost my edge? Because you hesitate now. Because you hope for redemption even from creatures like me. His burning eyes fixed on mine. That hope will be your downfall. He attacked again, faster this time, his corrupted magic seeking to penetrate my defenses. But as we fought, I began to understand something crucial about my new nature. The purifying light wasn't just a defensive mechanism. It was a weapon. When Valdris's corruption met my radiance, it didn't just dissolve, it transformed. The dark energy that should have poisoned me instead became fuel for my own power, feeding the light until it blazed like a miniature sun. What are you, Valdris? Hissed, recoiling from my touch. I'm what vampires were meant to be, I replied, pressing my advantage. Before corruption, before predation, before monsters like you convinced them that cruelty was strength. I reached out and grasped his wrist. The moment my skin touched his golden fire raced up his arm, and for the first time in centuries, Valdris screamed, but it wasn't a scream of pain, it was a scream of remembrance. Through our contact, I could see into his mind, could witness the moment 800 years ago when he had chosen corruption over redemption. I saw the vampire he had been before, noble, protective, dedicated to guiding souls safely to their rest. And I saw the moment when fear had broken him. The Inquisition had come to his territory, burning everything he had tried to protect. His vampire children, his mortal charges, even the sacred groves where he had performed his guardian duties. All of it had been destroyed by zealots, who saw only monsters where once there had been protectors. In that moment of absolute loss, Valdris had made a choice. If humans would only see him as a monster, then a monster he would become. I can take it away, I whispered, my light pulsing through his corrupted form. The pain, the rage, the centuries of choosing cruelty over compassion. I can help you remember who you were. For a heartbeat, I felt him wavering, felt the ancient nobility stirring beneath layers of corruption, responding to the possibility of redemption. Then his eyes hardened, and he ripped free of my grasp. I chose this darkness, he snarled. I embraced what they said I was, and I became stronger for it. I will not let some misguided newborn strip away 8 centuries of perfect hatred. He raised both hands, and the corruption magic around him coalesced into something visible. Tendrils of absolute darkness that reached toward me like living shadows. The darkness struck me with the force of a tidal wave, but instead of overwhelming me, it seemed to change. Each tendril that touched my light transformed, corruption becoming purification, hatred becoming love. And through the transformed magic, I felt something impossible. I felt every vampire in the monastery, covenant and ally alike, connecting to my light. The purification wasn't just affecting Valdris. It was spreading, carried by the very magic he had intended to use as a weapon. Covenant vampires who had embraced monstrosity for centuries suddenly remembered what it felt like to care about something beyond their own hunger. "Stop," Valdris commanded, but his voice held desperation now. "Stop this at once." "I can't," I said, and realized it was true. The transformation had taken on a life of its own, spreading from vampire to vampire like a wave of golden fire. "It's not something I'm doing, it's something they're choosing." Around us, the battle was changing. Covenant vampires who had moments before been trying to kill us were now staring at their hands in wonder, feeling emotions they had buried for centuries. Some fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the return of conscience. Others simply stood in shocked silence, trying to process the restoration of their original nature. "You're destroying everything," Valdris raged. "Centuries of perfect predation, of vampire supremacy. I'm giving them back their choice," I corrected. "Something you took away from them when you convinced them that cruelty was the only option." But even as I spoke, I felt something troubling through my connection to the other vampires. The purification was working. Too well. Perhaps some of the Covenant vampires weren't just remembering their nobility, they were being overwhelmed by guilt for the centuries of atrocities they had committed. Through my expanded awareness, I felt one of them, a vampire named Lucien, who had been feeding on innocence for 400 years, begin to contemplate ending his own existence rather than live with the weight of his recovered conscience. This is the danger, I realized. Complete purification might be as destructive as complete corruption. "Darius," I called through our bond, "help me control this. The transformation is spreading too fast, too completely." His presence immediately joined with mine, his centuries of experience, helping to moderate the flow of purifying light. Together we managed to contain the effect, ensuring that it offered redemption without imposing unbearable guilt. But the damage to Valdris was already done. The ancient vampire stood in the center of the monastery, his corrupted form flickering between monster and the noble guardian he had once been. "You don't understand," he whispered, his voice broken. "Without the corruption, without the hatred, how do we live with what we've done? One day at a time," I said gently, approaching him with careful steps. "One choice at a time, one act of redemption at a time. The mortals I've killed, the innocents I've destroyed." Tears of blood ran down his cheeks. "How can forgiveness exist for creatures like us?" "Because forgiveness isn't about deserving it," I replied. "It's about choosing to be better than what you were. It's about deciding that your past doesn't have to define your future." I held out my hand to him, just as Darius had once held his hand out to me. "You can choose differently now," I said. "You can choose to be a guardian again." Valdris stared at my outstretched hand for a long moment. Around us, the other Covenant vampires waited, their own transformations depending on their leader's choice. Finally, slowly, he reached out and took my hand. The moment our fingers touched, the last of his corruption burned away, leaving behind a vampire who remembered what it meant to serve rather than to prey. But more than that, it left behind someone who understood, truly understood, the choice between monster and guardian. "We have work to do," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of atonement. All of us. The damage we've done. It will take lifetimes to repair. Good thing we have lifetimes, I said, smiling through my own tears. And good thing none of us have to do it alone. Around us, vampires who had been enemies moments before began to approach each other cautiously, the purifying light helping them see past old grudges and territorial disputes to the common purpose they shared. This is what we were meant to be, Darius said, his arms coming around me from behind. Not rulers or predators or monsters. Guardians, protectors, servants of the balance between life and death. Will it last? I asked. The transformation, the change of heart, will it hold? That depends on them, he replied. Redemption isn't a single moment, Elena. It's a choice that has to be made over and over again, every day for the rest of eternity. I looked around the monastery at the dozens of vampires who were experiencing their true nature for the first time in centuries. Some would undoubtedly struggle with the transition. Others might even fall back into old patterns despite the purification. But they would have the choice now. And that, more than any magic or compulsion, was what would truly determine the future of vampire kind. So what now? I asked. Now we rebuild, Darius said. We help them remember not just what they were, but what they can become. We create a new covenant, not of blood, but of redemption. Together, always together, he promised, and kissed me as the sun rose over the monastery, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that perfectly matched the light radiating from our joined souls. But their greatest challenge lay not in transforming monsters into guardians, but in convincing the mortal world that such transformation was even possible. 3 months later, the letters arrived at dawn, carried by ravens whose eyes held more intelligence than any mortal bird should possess. I was in the garden, behind our new stronghold, not the Gothic monstrosity that vampire lore suggested, but a restored abbey that had once been dedicated to caring for the poor and sick. It seemed appropriate that vampires seeking redemption should make their home in a place once devoted to healing. News from the outside world? Darius asked, emerging from the abbey with 2 cups of blood, ethically sourced from willing donors who understood our true nature. Reports from our scouts, I confirmed, breaking the wax seals with careful fingers. And a formal communication from the church. His eyebrows rose. That can't be good. I scanned the contents of the papal missive, my enhanced reading speed allowing me to absorb its formal Latin in seconds. Actually, it's better than I expected. They're not calling for another inquisition? They're calling for a meeting, I said, hardly believing the words myself. Pope Innocent himself wants to discuss the possibility of cooperation. Darius set down his cup with careful precision. Cooperation between the church and vampires. 3 months ago, that would have been unthinkable. 3 months ago, vampires who could purify corruption and choose redemption would have been unthinkable too. Around us, the abbey grounds bustled with activity as our growing community went about their daily tasks. Former Covenant vampires worked alongside Darius's original followers, their ancient grievances set aside in favor of shared purpose. Some tended the gardens that would provide herbs for healing. Others crafted items that could help mortals defend themselves against the rogue vampires who still chose predation over redemption. All of them were learning what it meant to serve rather than rule. How many have joined us now? I asked, watching Isabella teach a group of newly transformed vampires how to resist the hunting instinct. 237, Darius replied, including 43 who were part of the Covenant until your light reached them. And how many have chosen differently? His expression darkened. 56 confirmed rogues still operating across Europe. They've rejected redemption entirely, claiming that our purification is actually a form of spiritual castration. I sighed. Not every vampire could be saved, apparently. Some preferred the simplicity of predation to the complexity of conscience. The church knows about the rogues. That's why they want to meet, he confirmed. They're proposing an alliance, church hunters working alongside redeemed vampires to eliminate the true threats to mortal safety. It was a staggering proposal. After centuries of holy war, the church was willing to acknowledge that not all vampires were monsters, that some of us could be allies rather than enemies. What do you think? I asked. I think, Darius said carefully, that it depends entirely on their sincerity. If they truly want cooperation, if they're willing to judge us by our actions rather than our nature, then it could work. And if they're simply looking for a new way to eliminate us, then we'll face that challenge when it comes. He took my hand, his touch still sending electric currents through our bond. But Elena, for the first time in 8 centuries, I actually have hope that vampires and humans might coexist peacefully. I squeezed his fingers, feeling the same cautious optimism stirring in my chest. Around us, the abbey continued its quiet bustle of purposeful activity. Valdris emerged from the library, where he spent most of his time cataloging the knowledge that centuries of vampire civilization had accumulated. Marcus was training with Gabriel, learning combat techniques that emphasized protection rather than predation. Even Lilith had found a place here, using her political connections to smooth relationships with mortal authorities, who were slowly learning to trust us. It wasn't perfect. It might never be perfect. But it was better than the endless cycle of hatred and violence that had defined vampire-human relations for so long. There's something else, Darius said, his voice taking on a different quality. Something I've been meaning to discuss with you. What? He turned to face me fully, and I saw something in his dark eyes that made my heart race. The bond between us, it's evolving, growing stronger and more complex each day. Is that bad? It's unprecedented, he said. But then, so are you. So are we. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. Elena, I've lived for 8 centuries without truly understanding what love meant. I thought it was possession, or desire, or simply the comfort of not being alone. And now I know that love is choice. Every day, every moment, choosing to put someone else's well-being alongside your own. Choosing to grow together rather than apart. Choosing to face eternity as partners, rather than as individual immortals who happen to share space. He dropped to one knee in the abbey garden, pulling a ring from his pocket that seemed to be carved from crystallized starlight. Elena Blackthorne, he said, his voice carrying the weight of forever. Will you choose me? Not just for now, not just until something better comes along, but for all the endless years ahead of us. Will you marry me and help me learn what it truly means to love someone more than eternity itself? I stared down at him, this magnificent ancient being who had seen civilizations rise and fall, who commanded power beyond mortal comprehension, who had somehow chosen me as his equal and partner. Yes, I whispered, tears streaming down my cheeks. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll choose you every day for the rest of eternity. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and I felt our bond flare with new intensity. Not just the connection between vampire and vampire, but something deeper. The promise of 2 souls who had found their perfect complement. As he rose and kissed me, I could feel our future spreading out before us like an infinite tapestry. Challenges, yes. Setbacks and sorrows and moments when hope seemed impossible. But also joy, discovery, the satisfaction of work that mattered, love that endured, and the knowledge that we would face it all together. Around us, the abbey community cheered as they witnessed our engagement. Vampires who had spent centuries believing they were incapable of love celebrated the proof that redemption was not just possible, but beautiful. And in that moment, surrounded by creatures who had chosen guardianship over predation, protection over possession, love over hunger, I understood what we had truly accomplished. We hadn't just transformed a few dozen vampires. We had proven that change was possible for anyone, mortal or immortal, human or monster, who was willing to choose something better than what they had been. So what now? I asked. admiring the way my engagement ring caught the morning light. "Now we plan a wedding," Darius said, grinning with joy that made him look centuries younger. "And then we spend the rest of eternity showing the world what love between natural enemies can accomplish. Together, always together," he promised, and kissed me again as our new covenant of love and redemption spread its wings and prepared to change the world. In the end, the strongest bonds aren't forged by blood or magic. They're built on the choice to see the light in others, even when darkness seems to be all that remains.